Hello, my name is Father James Kelleher, and I'm a priest in the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity. And I'm the founder and director of Eucharistic Family Rosary Crusade. I do Rosary Crusades all over the United States, Ireland, England, and even in Central America. And in these crusades, I promote the daily family rosary and weekly Eucharistic adoration. And so today we're talking about Saint Thomas Aquinas and the Eucharist. And the part of Saint Thomas and Aquinas and the Eucharist that I'd like to focus on is his teaching of the Eucharist as spiritual food for our souls. When we think about the Eucharist, we understand the principle of transubstantiation. That when the priest is at the altar during the Mass and he says the words of consecration, that bread and wine become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. All that we see are the accidents now of the bread, the accidents of the wine. But Jesus Christ himself is substantially present under those species. What does that mean? Let's think for a minute about what happens when you and I receive the Eucharist. When you and I receive the Eucharist, we're not actually chewing Jesus' body and blood at that moment. What we're doing is we're chewing the accidents of the bread under which Jesus has made himself substantially present, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Jesus is present there with his glorified body as he is in heaven. No, what's happening is, I want to make a comparison. If you and I sit down at a meal to eat some food, we transform that food to become part of us. That food becomes part of us. But when we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, Jesus doesn't become part of us, we become part of him. He transforms us and makes us into himself. So this was a very profound teaching that Thomas gives us, and of course it's all based on John chapter 6, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life. He who eats me shall have eternal life. Unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you shall not have life in you. I hope that this little understanding of what happens when we receive Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity, the most holy Eucharist, helps you and me to understand just how infinitely powerful Jesus is when we receive him. He actually comes and lives in us. He actually makes us into himself. He makes us one in his mystical body. That's why when it's a great meditation to think about how when you and I receive Jesus in the Eucharist, how people all over the world are receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, we're all being made one in him. Jesus is the source and the summit of the Christian life. When Thomas Aquinas got towards the end of his life, he was working on that massive theological work, the Summa, and he had completed everything he had to say about Jesus in the Eucharist, but he still had a few more things to say about other parts of theology. However, one day when he was in prayer, this was in the year maybe 1272 or 1273, one day he was in prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and our crucified Lord was there above him in the crucifix, on the crucifix. And he had such a deep mystical experience that his whole body levitated, and one of the brothers saw it happen. And after this experience lasted some length of time. And afterwards, Thomas recollected himself. He left the chapel, and his assistant, who used to take all his dictation, said, well, okay, isn't it time for us to start writing? And Thomas says, I have no more to write. Everything that I've written is straw in comparison to what I just experienced in the real presence of Jesus in the most holy Eucharist. And so Thomas couldn't pick up his pen again to write anymore. Instead, he spent his last weeks and months in contemplation, in the real presence of Jesus, body, blood, soul, and divinity, in the most holy Eucharist. Ave Maria.